We've been talking about percentages, how to change them into fractions, into decimals, changing decimals into percents, fractions into percents, all of that stuff. And that's something you really needed to know to be able to move forward with percentages. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about in this video today is we're going to talk about finding a percentage of a number. And that's very, very, very valuable, especially when you're going shopping. If you ever shop at Kohl's, you know, a lot of percentages off. And you need to know, okay, so if something is 30% off, how do I find that number? What is 30% of the price that I'm paying? So that I can calculate how much I'm saving and things like that. And it's part of the process. Now, there's a little bit more to it than what we're going to talk about today to find something like that in that example, but it's just an example of where we're going to be, and this is an element of it to be able to use in the real world. And that's important because if we don't know why we're using this in the real world, then what's the use, right? Okay. So let's talk about finding a percent of a number. And I'm going to give you an example. We're going to walk you through it. We, like I have somebody else here. No, it's just me and the computer. Me and you. And we'll go through that, and hopefully this will help you out with how to figure out how to find a percentage of a number. So let's get to it. All right. I have an example here. This is 40% of 50. So I need to find out what number is the same as 40% of the number 50. So basically what we're doing is we're taking this percentage that we know is 40% of this and finding what that number is. Okay? So it's like saying, okay, if I'm going to save 40% off a pair of shoes that are $50, which are probably pretty cheap shoes, 40% off of 40, I need to find out, okay, how much is that 40%? So that I know that, okay, 40% of 50 is this many dollars. If I subtract that from the original, that's going to give me how much I'm going to pay. Make sense? Okay. So first we need to find out what 40% is. So what we do is we know, and we've talked about how 40%, any percentage, is based on 100. And the best thing to do is how our book shows us, and I'm going to show you the way that the book shows us, and then I'm going to show you a different way. Okay? So that you have a couple options. Pick whichever one's best for you, or whichever one Mrs. Hour tells you to do. She's the boss, so listen to her, first of all. Okay? So, since we know the percentages are based on 100, I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it into a fraction. And we've talked about that in the previous videos of how to take this and make it into a fraction. Now, luckily for you, we're not going to put it in simplest form. Now, that is definitely an option to put it in simplest form to make your life a little easier. Okay? But you're going to end up the same way. This way, I'm going to give you a little bit more work. So I would advise you to simplify, but I know you guys hate doing that. Even though it will save you some time in the end, I know you hate doing it, so it's your choice. Leave it up to you. I'm not doing your homework for you. I'm just showing you how to do it. All right, so we're going to put this in the fraction, and of 50. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply it times 50. This fraction times 50. All right, and then that's going to give us a number. Now, of course, since we've talked about before, multiplying fractions, if you have a whole number, you want to multiply it times a fraction, you put it over 1. Okay? So, the easy part is the denominator because it's 100 times 1. Okay? All right. Now, here comes the hard part. 40 times 50. Actually, 2,000. I can do it in my head because I'm smart. See? You watch these videos, do this, you'll be smart like me. Smarter than me, probably, which wouldn't be saying much. Okay, so now I've got this whole mass of whatever. Okay? And then what I have to do is I'm going to see how many times this can go into the top number. I'm going to start dividing. Okay? Because it's an improper fraction after all. And then that will give me the number that is 40% of 50. So I see, okay, how many times will 100 go into 2,000? Well, of course, it will go in 20 times. So what is 40% of 50? It is 20. Okay? Now, if you would have simplified this and say we put this as 4 over 10 times 50 over 1 I'm showing you how this simplifying would save you some brain cramps. This is a lot easier to deal with because we've got 10 times 1 is going to be 10, 4 times 50 is 200. It's a lot easier in our brain to figure out how many times 10 will go into 200 than how many times 100 will go into 2000. It's the extra zeros that kind of mess with 6th graders' heads. But you still get the same answer. Okay? All right. So that's one way of doing it, is making it into a fraction, multiplying it by whatever you're trying to find the percentage of, which in this case was 50, and then simplifying your fraction. Okay? Show you the other way. All right, we've also talked about how we change a percentage into a decimal. And this is the way that I'm going to show you how to do that using this. So that's the other way, is instead of just putting this as a fraction, you change it into a decimal. Now, the book, and probably what Mrs. Howard is going to teach you, is going to teach you the fraction way, because it has to do with ratios and things like that. So that's the way. If she wants you to do it that way, that's the way you want to do it. But I'm just giving you another option that may make sense to some of you. Okay? Now, I'm going to change this into a decimal. Now, remember, anytime that we are changing a percentage into a decimal, we're going to move the decimal over 2 places to the left. So I move this over 2 places to the left. It gives me 4/10. Okay? And then what I'm going to do the same thing that I did with a fraction, where I change this into a fraction. Instead, I change this to a decimal, and I'm doing the same thing. I'm going to multiply it by whatever number I'm trying to find the percentage of. In this case, it's 50 again. And now I'm going to multiply these two together. Okay? And when I do that, I'm going to get this. Let's see. For all of you that can't do it in your head, let's do it like this. And then I count my decimal. 1 decimal place comes over. Guess what? I get the same answer as I did before. I get 20. Okay? Now that's the way I do it in my head. If Mrs. Auer wants you to do it the other way, you do it that other way, but keep this in mind, because it's an alternative. Not everybody's brains work differently, or work the same. They all work differently. So if you like the fraction way, do it the fraction way. If you like it this way, do it this way.